The gym at 9:30 on a Tuesday night is a different animal than the one that exists during daylight hours. Gone are the clusters of friends spotting each other between sets, the casual conversations that drift across the weight room, the energy that comes with bodies moving in rhythm throughout the day. What remains is something quieter, more honest. The fluorescent lights hum overhead with a persistence that feels almost meditative, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that makes shadows sharper and silence deeper. I am bent over the bench press, my arms trembling not just from the weight, but from something I cannot yet name. 85 pounds. It might as well be 200 for how my muscles strain against the metal, for how my breath comes in short, uneven bursts that fog the small space between my mouth and the bar. My form is terrible. I know this even as I struggle through the motion, even as my shoulders roll forward and my grip threatens to slip. That is when I hear his voice, low and steady beside me. Breathe. Don't fight it. Andre is crouched next to the bench, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his skin despite the perpetual chill of the gym's air conditioning. His hands hover just beneath the barbell, ready to catch it if my strength gives out completely, which seems increasingly likely with each second that passes. There is something about his presence that makes the weight feel both heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because I'm suddenly aware of being watched, of being seen in my struggle. Lighter because I know, with absolute certainty, that he will not let me fail. When I was 17, I made a promise to myself that I would never be the kind of person who needed saving. I would be self-sufficient, capable, strong enough to carry my own weight in every sense of the phrase. It is a promise I have broken more times than I care to count, but never so completely as I do in this moment, with Andre's steady gaze on me and his voice guiding me through something as simple as lifting a piece of metal from my chest to the air above it. His hand brushes against my wrist as he helps guide the bar back into position. A touch so brief it might have been accidental, if not for the way it lingers, just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. The contact sends something electric through my skin, something that has nothing to do with the workout and everything to do with the quiet intensity of his attention. When the barbell finally clatters back onto the rack, the sound echoes through the nearly empty gym like a small celebration. I collapse against the bench, my chest heaving, sweat pooling in the hollow of my throat. My arms feel like water, useless and trembling, and I cannot decide if I'm proud of myself for completing the set or embarrassed by how much help I needed to get there. Andre laughs, then, a sound that is both gentle and genuinely amused. It is not the kind of laughter that makes you feel small, but the kind that makes you feel seen. He claps his hand against my shoulder, a gesture that is casual and supportive and somehow intimate all at once. See? You just needed someone to push you. The words settle into the space between us, and I realize that he's talking about more than just the bench press. There's something in his tone, something in the way he is looking at me, that suggests layers of meaning I am not quite ready to examine. I nod anyway, because nodding seems safer than speaking, safer than trying to articulate the strange mix of gratitude and confusion and something else that is building in my chest. The gym is quiet around us, just the distant hum of the air conditioning and the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. In the corner, a woman is running on one of the treadmills, her footsteps creating a steady rhythm that feels like a heartbeat. The free weights are scattered across their designated area, evidence of the day's activity, but otherwise we might as well be alone in the world. I sit up slowly, my muscles protesting the movement, and reach for the towel I brought with me. The simple act of wiping the sweat from my face feels monumental, as if I am cleaning away more than just the physical evidence of exertion. Andre is still standing beside the bench, not moving toward the next exercise or checking his watch or doing any of the things I would expect a trainer to do. Instead, he is just present, waiting. It occurs to me that this is the first time in my 20 years of life that someone has pushed me to do something I did not think I could do and stay to witness the aftermath. Not the triumph, exactly, because lifting 85 pounds is hardly a triumph in the grand scheme of things. but the vulnerability. The moment when the weight comes off and you're left with nothing but your own breathing and the knowledge that you have just allowed someone to see you strain against your limitations. The fluorescent light above us flickers once, casting Andre's face in brief shadow before returning to its steady glow. In that flicker, I catch something in his expression that I have not noticed before. It is subtle, almost hidden beneath his easy confidence and professional demeanor, but it is there nonetheless. A kind of tenderness that seems out of place in a gym, a gentleness that speaks to something deeper than the relationship between trainer and client. When he suggested these late-night sessions 3 weeks ago, I assumed it was purely practical. The gym is less crowded after 9, he explained. More equipment available, fewer distractions. It makes sense, I told myself. It is efficient. But sitting here now, with the weight of his attention settling over me like a blanket, I begin to wonder if efficiency was ever really the point. Andre moves to adjust the weight on the barbell, preparing for my next set, and I watch his hands as he works. They're strong hands, capable and sure, the kind that know exactly how much pressure to apply and when to let go. I find myself wondering what it would feel like to have those hands touch me with intention, not just the incidental contact that comes with spotting someone through an exercise, but deliberate touch, purposeful and slow. The thought surprises me with its clarity, and I look away quickly, focusing instead on the worn vinyl of the bench beneath me. This is dangerous territory, I tell myself. Andre is my trainer. He is 2 years older than me, more experienced in every way that matters. He is kind to me because kindness is part of his job, because pushing people past their comfort zones requires a certain amount of gentleness to be effective. But then he is crouching beside me again, and his voice is soft when he asks if I am ready for the next set. There is something in the way he says it that makes me think he might be asking about more than just the bench press, something that makes the air between us feel charged with possibility. I nod because what else can I do, and position myself beneath the bar once more. But as Andre takes his place beside me, as his presence settles into the space just beyond my peripheral vision, I realize that whatever is happening here in this fluorescent-lit corner of an almost empty gym at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, it has very little to do with building muscle and everything to do with something I do not yet have words for. The weight feels different this time as I lift it from the rack. Not easier, exactly, but more manageable somehow, as if Andre's proximity has lent me strength I did not know I possessed. And as I lower the bar toward my chest and push it back up again, I find myself thinking that maybe needing someone to push you is not the same thing as needing to be saved. Maybe it is just another way of learning how to be strong. The moment lingers longer than it should, suspended in the fluorescent-lit air between us like a question waiting to be asked. I have always been the kind of person who finds safety in invisibility. In high school, I perfected the art of sliding into the back row before the bell rang, of keeping my head down in hallways crowded with voices I never quite learned how to join. College was supposed to be different, I told myself during those first weeks on campus. A chance to reinvent, to become someone braver than the boy who spent 4 years eating lunch alone in the library. But old habits die hard, and by October of my sophomore year, I had managed to make myself just as invisible as I had ever been. The campus recreation center was supposed to change that. At least, that was the story I told myself when I finally worked up the courage to sign up for a membership. I was tired of feeling weak, tired of catching glimpses of myself in mirrors and seeing someone who looked like he might blow away in a strong wind. More than that, I was tired of being forgettable, of existing at the edges of other people's lives without ever quite breaking through to the center. The first time I walked through those glass doors, the sheer scale of the place nearly sent me turning around. The main workout floor stretched out like an airplane hangar, filled with machines and free weights, and people who moved with the kind of confidence I had never possessed. The air was thick with the scent of rubber mats and metal, and something else I could not quite identify, perhaps the residue of 1,000 different kinds of determination. I lasted 20 minutes that first day before retreating to the safety of my dorm room, defeated by the complexity of machines I did not understand and intimidated by the casual competence of everyone around me. It took 3 more false starts before I finally approached the front desk and asked about personal training, the words coming out in a mumble that forced the girl behind the counter to lean forward to catch them. That is how I met Andre. Not with fanfare or dramatic music or any of the cinematic flourishes you might expect from a story like this, but with paperwork and scheduling conflicts and the mundane practicalities of matching a trainer with a client. He was finishing up with someone else when I was introduced to him, his attention focused on correcting the form of a woman who was attempting something called a deadlift. I watched from a distance as he demonstrated the movement himself, his body moving with an economy of motion that made it look effortless. When he finally turned to me, his smile was immediate and genuine, the kind that reaches the eyes and transforms an entire face. He was taller than I had expected, with dark hair that was perpetually slightly messed up and the kind of build that suggested strength without vanity. Later, I would learn that he was studying sports medicine, that he approached training with the same methodical precision he brought to his coursework. But in that first moment, all I registered was the warmth of his handshake and the way he said my name like it mattered. Our initial sessions were structured, professional, everything you would expect from the relationship between a trainer and his client. Andre assessed my fitness level with the clinical detachment of someone who had done this hundreds of times before, noting my weaknesses and limitations without judgment, but with a clarity that was somehow more embarrassing than mockery would have been. He designed a program tailored to my goals, explained proper form with patience that seemed genuine rather than forced, and pushed me to work harder than I had ever worked in my life. But somewhere between those first tentative workouts and the routine we eventually established, something shifted. The gym began to feel less like a place I was visiting and more like a sanctuary I was inhabiting. Andre stopped feeling like an authority figure I was paying to tolerate me and started feeling like someone who was genuinely invested in my progress. Not just the numbers on the weight plates or the measurements we took every few weeks, but the quieter victories that nobody else would notice. The way I stopped hunching my shoulders when I walked. The way I began to meet his eyes when he spoke to me instead of looking at the floor. The way I started to believe, almost despite myself, that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. Andre, I came to understand, was the kind of person everyone seemed to know. He had a gift for making people feel seen, for remembering not just their names, but the details of their lives that mattered to them. He knew which of his clients were dealing with injuries, which ones were training for specific events, which ones were simply trying to feel more comfortable in their own skin. He remembered birthdays and exam schedules and the small victories that might seem insignificant to anyone else. With me, though, there was something different. A quality of attention that felt more personal than professional, silences that stretched just a beat longer than they needed to, conversations that drifted away from sets and reps toward topics that had nothing to do with fitness. He asked about my classes, my major, the sketches I mentioned working on late at night when I could not sleep. He shared stories about growing up in 3 different states because his father was in the military, about never quite feeling like anywhere was home. These conversations happened in the spaces between exercises, during water breaks that lasted longer than they should have, in the quiet moments after our sessions when neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. The gym around us would gradually empty as the evening wore on, the din of conversation and clanking weights fading to something softer, more intimate. And in those moments, I began to understand that what was happening between us was about more than just training my body to be stronger. Andre was teaching me something I had never learned before: how to let someone see me struggle and not be ashamed of it, how to accept help without feeling diminished by it, how to trust that someone else's belief in my potential might be more accurate than my own doubts. The fluorescent lights above us hummed their familiar tune, and I found myself looking forward to that sound in a way that surprised me. Looking forward to the routine we had built together, to the quiet encouragement of his voice, to the way he made me feel like I was worth the effort. It happens on a Thursday night in November when the gym is nearly deserted and the windows are fogged with condensation from the temperature difference between inside and the cold snap that has settled over campus. I am packing up my things after what felt like our most intense session yet, my muscles pleasantly exhausted in a way that has become familiar over the past month. My water bottle clatters against the metal of my locker as I stuff it into my gym bag, and I'm already mentally preparing for the walk back to my dorm when I realize Andre has not left. He is sitting on one of the benches near the free weights, his own bag at his feet, but he makes no move to gather his things. Instead, he is watching me with an expression I cannot quite read, something thoughtful and almost hesitant that is entirely unlike his usual confident demeanor. The silence stretches between us for a moment that feels longer than it probably is, punctuated only by the distant sound of someone using the rowing machine in the cardio section. Then he speaks, and his words come out casual, almost offhand, as if he has just thought of them rather than having carried them with him all evening. You ever train for anything outside the gym? Like life. I stop what I am doing, my hands stilling on the zipper of my bag. The question catches me off guard, not just because it comes from nowhere, but because of the way he asks it. There is something vulnerable in his voice, something that suggests this is not the kind of conversation he has with all of his clients. I fumble for an answer, my mind cycling through responses that all feel inadequate or wrong. What do you mean? I finally manage, though the words feel clumsy in my mouth. Andre runs a hand through his hair, a gesture I have come to recognize as something he does when he is thinking carefully about what he wants to say. The fluorescent lights cast shadows under his eyes that make him look older somehow, more serious than the easygoing trainer I have come to know over these past weeks. Sometimes it is not just about muscles, he says, his gaze finding mine and holding it steady. Sometimes it is about letting yourself be seen. The words land in the space between us with a weight that has nothing to do with the barbells and dumbbells surrounding us. I feel something shift in my chest, a recognition of truth that I am not entirely prepared to acknowledge. Because he is right, of course. What has been happening in these late-night sessions has never been only about building physical strength. It has been about something deeper, something I have been afraid to name even to myself. I think about the version of myself that walked through these doors 2 months ago, the one who could barely meet Andre's eyes during our first consultation. I think about how I have changed, not just in the obvious ways, the muscle definition that is finally starting to appear, the confidence in my movements that comes from repetition and practice, but in the quieter ways that only I would notice. The way I no longer automatically choose the seat furthest from the professor in my literature classes. The way I caught myself laughing at something my roommate said last week instead of just offering the polite smile I usually default to. Andre has been training me for more than just bench presses and squats. I realize he has been training me to take up space, to believe that my presence in a room might be welcome rather than merely tolerated. And now, sitting here in this nearly empty gym with the weight of his attention focused entirely on me, he is asking me to acknowledge that transformation explicitly. The admission feels too large for the moment, too significant for the casual way he posed the question. But there is something in his expression that suggests he already knows the answer, that maybe he's been waiting for me to catch up to what he understood from the beginning. I have spent my entire life perfecting the art of hiding, I want to tell him, of making myself small enough that no one would think to look too closely, would notice the things about me that feel too complicated or too frightening to examine in bright light. But here, in these sessions, something has been different. Here, he has been asking me to be bigger, stronger, more present than I have ever allowed myself to be. The woman on the rowing machine finishes her workout and leaves, her footsteps echoing across the empty space until the main door closes behind her with a soft thud. Now we are truly alone, just Andre and me, and the question hanging in the air between us like a challenge. I do not know how to let myself be seen. I finally say, the words coming out quieter than I intended. The admission feels dangerous, like stepping onto ice that might not hold my weight. Andre's expression softens, and he leans forward slightly, closing some of the distance between us without quite crossing it entirely. That is what training is for, he says, learning how to do the things that scare you. There is something in his tone that makes me think he is not just talking about me anymore, that maybe this conversation is as much about his own vulnerabilities as it is about mine. The thought is both comforting and terrifying, the possibility that this person I have come to admire so much might also be struggling with questions of his own. The gym feels different around us now, charged with a kind of electricity that has nothing to do with the machines and equipment and everything to do with the space we have created for honesty. I look at Andre, really look at him, and see something I had not noticed before. Beneath his easy confidence and professional competence, there's a gentleness that feels personal rather than practiced, a care that extends beyond the boundaries of what I'm paying him for. And I realize, with a clarity that is both thrilling and frightening, that whatever is happening between us has moved far beyond the simple transaction of trainer and client. We have wandered into territory that neither of us mapped out, guided by something neither of us has quite been brave enough to name. After that Thursday night conversation, something fundamental shifts in the rhythm of our sessions. The change is subtle at first, so gradual I almost convince myself I am imagining it. But by the third week following Andre's question about training for life, I can no longer pretend that what is happening between us falls within the normal boundaries of a professional relationship. The workouts themselves become less rigid, more intuitive. Where once Andre followed a carefully structured program with specific sets and predetermined rest periods, now he seems to read my energy and adjust accordingly. Some evenings we push harder than ever before, and I surprise myself by meeting challenges I would have thought impossible just weeks earlier. Other nights, when he can see that I am carrying the weight of a difficult day or a looming exam, he guides me through gentler movements that feel more like meditation than exercise. Between sets, we talk, not the surface-level conversation of trainer and client, but the kind of dialogue that reveals the contours of a person's inner landscape. I tell him about my childhood in a small town, where being different felt like a liability, about parents who love me but have never quite understood the quiet intensity that has always defined me. I admit that I started sketching because it was the only way I could make sense of the world when words felt inadequate, that I draw late at night when the residence hall is quiet, because those are the only hours when I feel brave enough to create something that might matter. Andre listens with the kind of attention that makes you feel like your words are being carefully collected and treasured rather than simply heard. When I mention that I have been working on a series of drawings inspired by the way light changes throughout the day in the gym, he asks to see them with a genuine curiosity that both thrills and terrifies me. No one has ever asked to see my sketches before. No one has ever seemed to understand that they represent something more personal than hobby. In return, he shares pieces of his own story that feel like gifts. He tells me about growing up in a military family, about the strange rootlessness that comes from never staying in one place long enough to call a home. He describes the loneliness of being the new kid in 7 different schools, of learning to be charming and adaptable, because those are the skills that helped you survive constant displacement. He confesses that he still does not know what he wants to do after graduation, that the sports medicine degree feels more like something he stumbled into than something he chose with intention. Most surprisingly, he admits that he has never been good at staying in one place long enough to build the kind of relationships that require real vulnerability. Until now, he adds, and the weight of those 2 words settles between us like a promise neither of us is quite ready to make explicit. These conversations happen in the spaces between exercises, during water breaks that stretch longer than they should, in the quiet moments when we are both catching our breath and the gym around us has grown, so still we can hear the hum of the vending machines in the lobby. The fluorescent lights seem softer somehow during these interludes, less harsh and more forgiving, as if they too understand that something delicate is being cultivated in this space. Andre's teaching style evolves as well, becoming more tactile, more personal. When he corrects my form now, his hands linger longer than strictly necessary. He guides my shoulders into proper position for a shoulder press and lets his palms rest there for a moment after I've found the right alignment. He adjusts my grip on the barbell, and his fingers brush against mine with a deliberateness that makes my heart skip in a way that has nothing to do with cardiovascular exertion. The touches are always appropriate, always justifiable within the context of training, but there's an intimacy to them that feels new and significant. When he spots me during bench press, he stands closer than he used to, close enough that I can feel the warmth of his body and catch the scent of whatever soap he uses. When I struggle with a particularly challenging set of squats, he places one hand on my lower back for support and encourages me with words spoken so quietly they feel like secrets. I begin to understand that he is teaching me more than just how to lift weights or build muscle. He is teaching me how to trust, how to accept guidance without feeling diminished by it, how to push past the voice in my head that insists I am not strong enough, not worthy enough, not enough in any of the ways that matter. But more than that, he is teaching me how to be present in my own body in a way I never have been before. For most of my life, I have existed primarily in my head, treating my physical self as little more than a vehicle for getting my thoughts from one place to another. Under Andre's careful guidance, I am learning to inhabit my body fully, to appreciate what it can do rather than focusing on what it cannot. The change is not just physical, though the physical changes are undeniable. I'm stronger now, visibly so. My shoulders are broader, my arms more defined. I can lift weights that would have been impossible 2 months ago. But the more profound transformation is happening somewhere deeper, in the growing confidence that allows me to take up space without apology, to speak up in class discussions, to meet Andre's eyes when he looks at me and not immediately glance away. And slowly, carefully, I begin to realize that I am not the only one being changed by what is happening between us. Andre, too, seems different, more settled somehow, as if our sessions have given him something he did not know he was looking for. When he talks about the future now, his voice carries less uncertainty. When he mentions the possibility of staying in town after graduation rather than moving on to the next chapter of his perpetually mobile life, he looks at me, when he says it, as if my presence might be part of what has made this place feel like somewhere worth remaining. It happens on a Wednesday evening in early December when the campus is already decorated for finals week, and everyone seems to be moving through the world with a particular exhaustion that comes from too much coffee and too little sleep. I have been pushing myself harder than usual during our session, partly because of the stress I am carrying about my upcoming art history exam, and partly because I have begun to crave the endorphin rush that comes from working at the edge of my capabilities. Andre has been watching me more carefully than usual tonight, adjusting weights and rest periods with the kind of precision that suggests he can read my energy better than I can. When I finish my final set of deadlifts, my legs shaking from the effort, I do not even attempt to walk to the bench. Instead, I collapse directly onto the mat where I stand, my breath coming in ragged gasps that have as much to do with the emotional release of physical exertion as they do with oxygen debt. Andre drops down beside me, without hesitation, his own breathing slightly elevated from the workout he has been doing alongside mine. This is something that has developed over the past few weeks. The way he mirrors my exercises when he is not actively spotting me, as if we're training together rather than him simply guiding me through my routine. He lies back on the mat next to me, close enough that I can feel the heat radiating from his skin, and for a moment we just breathe together in the quiet sanctuary the gym has become. The silence is comfortable in a way that still surprises me. 6 months ago, I would have felt compelled to fill quiet moments like this with nervous chatter or self-deprecating comments about my performance. Now, I can simply exist in the space beside Andre without feeling the need to justify my presence or apologize for taking up air. When he finally speaks, his voice is soft and slightly hoarse from exertion. You know, you have changed more than you think. The words drift between us like something he has been considering for a while. Not just here, he continues, gesturing vaguely toward my arms where the evidence of our work together is becoming increasingly visible. But here, and he reaches over, his fingers brushing against my chest just above my heart with a touch so light it might have been accidental, if not for the deliberateness with which he lets his hand rest there for a moment before pulling away. The contact sends electricity through my entire body, a current that has nothing to do with static and everything to do with the recognition of something I have been trying not to acknowledge for weeks. I turn my head to look at him and find that he is already watching me with an expression that is both tender and uncertain, as if he has just revealed more than he intended and is waiting to see how I will respond. My throat feels tight, not from the workout, but from the weight of everything I've been carrying without speaking. The way I have begun looking forward to these sessions with an anticipation that has nothing to do with fitness goals. The way I find myself thinking about him during my other classes, wondering what he is doing and whether he ever thinks about me when we're not together. The way his voice has become the soundtrack to my determination, the way his belief in my potential has started to reshape my understanding of what I might be capable of. I do not have words for the way my heart pounds when he looks at me like this, with a focus that makes me feel like I am the only person in the world worth paying attention to. I do not have words for the way his praise affects me, how his quiet encouragement has become something I crave more than food or sleep or any of the other necessities that used to define my days. But lying here on this mat in the fluorescent-lit quiet of an almost empty gym, with Andre's eyes on mine and the memory of his touch still warm against my chest, I finally understand that words might not be necessary. Some truths are too large for language, too fundamental to be reduced to the clumsy approximation of speech. The recognition passes between us like a current, unspoken but unmistakable. This thing that has been building in the spaces between sets, in the careful way he adjusts my form, in the conversations that have gradually moved from professional to personal to something that feels like the foundation of intimacy. This awareness that what we have been calling training has been something else entirely, something that has been reshaping both of us in ways that extend far beyond the physical. Andre shifts slightly on the mat, angling his body toward mine, and the movement brings him close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that I can count the individual eyelashes that cast shadows on his cheeks. There is a question in his gaze, patient and hopeful and slightly afraid, as if he is asking permission for something we both want, but neither of us has been brave enough to name. The gym around us has grown completely quiet, even the distant sounds of the few remaining people on the cardio equipment fading into something that feels like privacy. The fluorescent lights hum their familiar tune overhead, and I realize that this sound, which I once found harsh and institutional, has become the soundtrack to the most important transformation of my life. I think about the person I was when I first walked through those glass doors, tentative and uncertain and convinced that I would never be strong enough to deserve the kind of attention Andre has been giving me. I think about all the ways I have changed, not just in muscle mass and definition, but in the quiet confidence that now allows me to hold his gaze without looking away, to exist in this moment without apology or explanation. And I know, with a certainty that feels like coming home, that this was never just about training. It has been about something much more fundamental, much more necessary. It has been about learning how to let someone see me completely and discovering that I am worth being seen. The weeks that follow our moment on the mat carry a different kind of weight, as if the air between us has become charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. We continue our sessions, maintaining the careful rhythm we have established, but everything feels heightened now. Every glance and accidental touch loaded with the awareness of what we have acknowledged without speaking. I find myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my dorm room and replaying the memory of Andre's hand against my chest, the way his eyes held mine in that fluorescent-lit quiet. The recognition that passed between us was unmistakable, but recognition and action are different things entirely. I am caught between wanting to preserve what we have and wanting to risk it all for what we might become. During the day, I move through my classes in a haze of distraction. My art history professor returns an essay with a note about my obvious preoccupation, and I realize I've been sketching Andre's profile in the margins of my lecture notes without even being conscious of it. The drawings are good, better than most of my work, as if the intensity of my feelings has somehow sharpened my ability to see and translate what I see on a paper. In the gym, we dance around the edges of honesty. Andre spots me during bench press, and his hands hover closer than they need to, ready to catch the weight, but also ready to catch me if I fall in ways that have nothing to do with physical safety. When he adjusts my form during squats, his touch lingers just long enough to suggest intention, and I find myself leaning into the contact before I can stop myself. The conversations between our sets grow more intimate, more revealing. He tells me about a relationship that ended badly his freshman year, about learning that trust was something he had to practice like any other skill. I share my own history of keeping people at a distance, of convincing myself that being alone was safer than risking the kind of vulnerability that could leave you broken. But even as we edge closer to honesty, there remains an invisible line neither of us seems willing to cross. He is still my trainer, I am still his client, and the professional boundary that once felt arbitrary now feels like both protection and prison. The choice, when it finally comes, arrives not with dramatic fanfare, but with the quiet persistence of winter settling over campus. It is a Thursday night in mid-December, 2 weeks before finals, and the gym is nearly empty because most people are either studying or attending the various end-of-semester parties that have begun sprouting across campus like seasonal flowers. Our workout has been intense, driven by nervous energy that has as much to do with the approaching end of the semester as it does with our unresolved situation. When we finish, I am exhausted in a way that feels like cleansing, as if I have worked out more than just physical tension. Andre begins to pack up his things, following the routine we have established over these past months. But tonight something is different. He moves more slowly than usual, and when he sits down on the edge of the mat instead of standing to leave, I know that this is the moment we have been avoiding and anticipating in equal measure. I sit beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touch, and wait. The silence stretches between us, comfortable but weighted with expectation. Around us, the gym settles into its evening quiet, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights and ventilation systems creating a soundtrack for whatever is about to happen. I could keep pretending, I realize. I could let him remain my trainer, my mentor, the safe harbor where I have learned to be stronger without risking the complications that come with wanting something more. It would be easier, certainly, safer. But as I sit here beside him, I understand that safety is no longer what I'm looking for. The revelation comes not as a sudden burst of clarity, but as a gradual recognition of something that has been true for weeks. I am tired of living in the spaces between honesty. I am tired of measuring my words and cataloging every touch to determine whether it meant something beyond the professional. I'm tired of pretending that what I feel for Andre falls within the neat boundaries of gratitude or admiration or any of the other acceptable emotions that would allow us to continue as we have been. When I finally speak, my voice is quiet but steady. I do not think I was ever training just for strength. The words hang in the air between us like a bridge I have just built with my bare hands, uncertain whether it will hold our weight, but no longer able to stand on opposite sides of the chasm that is open between what we are and what we might become. Andre turns to look at me, and in his expression, I see relief and fear and something that looks like hope. His response, when it comes, is equally quiet, equally steady. Me neither. 2 words that contain multitudes. Me neither, meaning that he too has been pretending, has been measuring distance and cataloging touches and lying awake at night thinking about the space between professional and personal. Me neither, meaning that whatever has been happening in these late-night sessions has been happening to both of us, transforming us both in ways that extend far beyond the original intention. The admission hangs between us, and I realize that this is what courage feels like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to speak truth in spite of it. We are sitting on the edge of something that could change everything or destroy what we have built. And for the first time in my life, I am willing to risk the destruction for the possibility of something real. Our hands brush against each other on the mat, and this time neither of us pulls away. The touch is gentle, tentative, but deliberate. A question and an answer and a promise all at once. 3 weeks in the new semester, the gym has settled back into its familiar rhythm after the holiday break. The New Year's resolution crowd has already begun to thin out, leaving behind the dedicated few who understand that transformation is measured not in days or weeks, but in the patient accumulation of small choices made consistently over time. I have become one of those people, though my reasons for being here have evolved far beyond what I could have imagined when I first walked through these doors 9 months ago. Tonight, the weight room is nearly empty again, returned to the sanctuary-like quality I have come to associate with the most important moments of my life. The fluorescent lights hum their familiar tune overhead, and I find myself grateful for their persistence, for the way they have illuminated not just my workouts, but the gradual revelation of who I am becoming. I grip the barbell with hands that are stronger now, steadier. 115 pounds, a number that would have seemed impossible in those early sessions when 85 pounds felt like lifting a small car. The weight settles across my chest with familiar pressure, and I breathe deeply before beginning the lift. The movement feels fluid now, controlled, my body moving with the kind of confidence that comes from months of practice and the knowledge that I am not doing this alone. Andre stands behind me, spotting as he always has, but everything about his presence feels different now. Where once his attention felt professional, careful to maintain appropriate boundaries, now there's an intimacy to the way he watches over me that speaks to the shift that has occurred between us. His hands hover beneath the bar, ready to assist if needed, but there is also something protective in his posture that extends beyond the mechanics of weight training. When I complete the set and guide the barbell back into the rack, the familiar clatter of metal against metal sounds like celebration. I sit up slowly, and Andre's hand comes to rest on my shoulder in a gesture that has become natural over these past weeks. The touch is no longer measured or questioned, no longer analyzed for professional appropriateness. It simply is like breathing or the steady beat of my heart after exertion. The transformation has been gradual, but undeniable. We still train together, still follow routines designed to challenge my growing strength, but the context has shifted entirely. Where once I was his client, now I am something more precious and more complex. Where once he was my trainer, now he is someone I am learning to love with the same dedication I once brought to avoiding being seen. Our conversations have deepened beyond what I thought possible. Between sets, we talk about futures that include each other, about the apartment Andre is considering renting off campus next year, and whether it has enough light for the easel I have finally admitted I want to set up. We discuss his plans to continue his education, perhaps pursuing physical therapy, and how that might work with my own ambitions to transfer to the art school 2 hours away. These are the conversations of people building something together, planning around each other's dreams rather than despite them. When Andre mentions staying in town after graduation, he no longer looks uncertain about the decision. When I talk about my art, about the series of sketches I've been working on that capture the way bodies move through space with purpose and grace, he asks to see them with the enthusiasm of someone who understands that my creativity is part of what he loves about me. The gym around us has become our place in a way that feels both private and significant. The late-night hours when most people are studying or sleeping have become sacred time, space carved out for the careful cultivation of something rare. Here, surrounded by the tools that helped us discover each other, we continue to grow stronger together. When our session ends tonight, we pack up our things with the unhurried pace of people who know they will be leaving together. Andre zips his gym bag and slings it over his shoulder, then waits for me to gather my things. This too has become routine, this walking out together into whatever weather awaits us, no longer pretending that our paths diverge at the gym's entrance. As we approach the door, I catch a glimpse of our reflection in the dark windows that face the parking lot. We look like what we are, two people who have found something worth protecting in each other. Andre is still the confident, charismatic person who first introduced himself to me with a smile that reached his eyes. But there is something softer about him now, something that speaks to the way love can make even the strongest people vulnerable. And I see myself transformed as well. Not just in the obvious ways, though those are undeniable. My shoulders are broader now, my posture straighter, my movements more assured. But the deeper change is visible too, in the way I no longer seem to be apologizing for taking up space, in the way I meet the camera's gaze without flinching. We step out into the cool February air, and Andre's arm brushes against mine as we walk toward the parking lot. The contact is casual, comfortable, but it still sends warmth through me in a way that suggests I will never tire of his proximity. Above us, the campus is quiet under a sky scattered with stars barely visible through the light pollution, and I think about how different everything looks now than it did 9 months ago when I was just a boy afraid of being seen. The training continues, will always continue, I realize. But now we are training for something different. Not just for strength or endurance or any of the measurable goals that once defined our sessions. Now we're training for love, for the kind of relationship that requires the same dedication and patience and willingness to push past comfort zones that we once brought to building muscle. As we reach our cars, Andre turns to me with a smile I have come to recognize as specifically mine, different from the professional warmth he shows his other clients, softer and more complicated and full of promises about the morning and all the mornings that will follow. Tomorrow we will be back here, continuing the work we started together, building something strong enough to last.